You're in a good place now. You are listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. On today's podcast, I want to talk about relationships. More so, is this relationship going to work? How many times have you asked that question in your own mind, dating somebody and wondering, is this going to last? Will this relationship work? Will it hold up to the test of time? Can you get past the stress, the anger, all the stuff that's going on and make this relationship actually work? As a therapist and a life coach, I hear this question often in my office. And there's a lot of factors that go into understanding if a relationship's going to work or not. And I want to talk about those factors. I want to discuss them. I want to get really deep in these factors because I know that you've asked yourself this question about relationships before. You may have even asked yourself this question about the current relationship that you're in. And I think we always want to know the answer to this question because we spend so much time cultivating this relationship. Relationships take time and effort and resources. And it's interesting how we can get stuck in a rut because we spent so much time cultivating this relationship. Well, you hear people often say, well, I've been in this relationship for 3 years and, it's got to work. I put 3 years of my time into this, okay? I wasted 3 years of my life. You hear people say that too. And so when we're thinking about relationships and we're asking ourselves, are they going to work? We've got to start out with the most important aspect of a working relationship. The one thing that sets it all apart and the one thing that you can't ever avoid. Okay? You can't ever avoid this. And what you can't avoid is what? It's timing. Timing. Timing is key. It's crucial to any relationship actually working. And the first concept of timing is you have to ask yourself, is both people in the right space, the right frame of mind to be in this relationship? Are you and your significant other in the right frame of mind to be in a working relationship? And how do you figure that out? Well, you got to sit there and say, are we in the right frame of mind? Are we emotionally ready for this relationship? Have we done the background work? Have we done the personal work to make sure that we're good? A lot of times we get into relationships and we have not dealt with our baggage. We have a lot of baggage. We haven't dealt with it, and we got to deal with it. And when we don't deal with it and we come into a relationship, what happens is we try to deal with that baggage in the relationship. Oftentimes we put that baggage on someone else. We find fault within them. We might criticize them, or we lash out because of our baggage and we misappropriate our anger on other people. Okay? And so timing is of the essence. If you're in the right place, are you emotionally in a good place? Are you mentally in a good place? Have you really worked through overcoming a lot of this stuff from your past? And I find another aspect of timing, and we'll talk a little bit more about past issues. We're going to talk a little bit more about anger and abandonment here later on in the podcast. But, when we're talking about timing, we're also talking about availability. Are you available for a relationship? Okay? This is a big deal. If you're married, if you're currently married and you think that you meet the love of your life when you're walking down the street, it's probably not the best timing. Okay? You are married. And I find it interesting when clients come into my office and they think that they've met Mr. Right or Mrs. Right. And it's like, but you are married and you have children and you live with your husband or you live with your wife. How could this be the right timing? And I understand how people think about soulmates. Well, this might be my soulmate. This might be my only chance to find true love. Is that true? I don't think so. I think we can fall in love with many different people. If you really think about the real concept of love, we're really supposed to love everybody unconditionally. So we're really supposed to be able to fall in love with everybody in a certain specific way. Not always in a romantic way, But really, if you think about it, the best relationships that I've seen in my practice and in my personal life are those relationships that you really love that person genuinely for who they are as a human being and love them as a spirit and all that great stuff. And then also that romantic, component is also there. And I find it interesting about availability because when somebody's available, it makes it cool because there's like no hiding, no secrecy. It's kind of like when you talk to some people, especially when I'm working with clients who have just recently gotten separated and they meet somebody, or they've been divorced or never been married and they meet somebody that is just recently divorced. And one of the big red flags that I really focus on is I say, hey, this person might have just gotten divorced, and I understand that they are available, but most of the time we're going through a lot of pain and suffering after a divorce. I don't care if there was no romance in the marriage. I don't care what was not existing in the marriage. But when we go through a divorce, it's almost like mourning a death. Okay, and you can't do that in a week, and you can't do that in 2 weeks, and you can't do that in 6 months usually. It's very hard, and you can't deal with all your baggage either in a short amount of time, too. You got to go through it, the process, either feeling like you were slighted or abandoned, or you initiated the divorce, but you had to do it for other reasons. Maybe the relationship was violent, emotionally draining, taxing, just quite negative. There's a lot of things like toxicity that you have to get through and work through a lot of things that happened during that marriage, overcome the divorce type stuff, and move on. And when I find clients that have just met somebody that's newly divorced, I really warn them because this person has not really dealt with their baggage at all. And sometimes, quite honestly, right after a divorce, when somebody gets divorced, some of those folks get right back together, okay? And, because a lot of times people get divorced because they think the grass is greener, or they think they're missing out on something, or they think they're going to find true love or whatever. But then they realize that what they have is pretty good. And I've seen people get into relationships with folks that have just recently been divorced and they've gotten burned. And it's painful because you put a lot of work into the relationship, but you're not looking at the red flags. And, if you've just met somebody and you're currently married or they're currently married, it's not the right time. And it's not right because you can't be honest in the situation. When you can't be truthful and honest in a relationship, it's not going to end up working out very good in the long run. Because think about it. If you're both married and, you meet outside of each person walks out, or what do you call it, step out of the marriage, and you meet each other, and you're having to sneak around, that's not very good. And then let's just say that you both get divorced. Aren't you going to always wonder in the back of your mind if you're cheating, or they're cheating on you? Because they were cheating on their wife or their husband to see you. And I think a lot of times when people meet each other in those types of circumstances, there's kind of a fairy tale aspect going on. Okay, there's a fairy tale aspect going on, not a reality. Because it is so whirlwind and just dramatic and very highly arousing and lots of emotions, but it's not real because you're not seeing that person all the time. You're having to sneak around. You got the endorphins going. There's all this kind of stuff. And so it can seem pretty cool at the time, but if you were to really, live with this person, it could be extremely different. And again, reflecting back on the fact that you're not available, okay? And if that was to work, if you did meet somebody and you were currently married and you actually did, find them a possible soulmate, I mean, the only thing that you could possibly do is talk to that person and let them know that you're working to get out of your situation to see what would happen. But then you would have to just do that and do that because you really want to be in that relationship. But you would have to basically get out of your relationship, get a divorce, and do all that process before you could honestly get into another relationship. And, a lot of people might not want to take that gamble, but also, how do you know that that's going to be better than what you already have? Doesn't make any sense. And so when it's about timing, it's about being available, but it's even more than that. So let's take the marriage off the table. Say that you're single and you meet somebody Now, when you meet that person, are they good and solid mentally and emotionally? And that's what I want to talk about right now, because, they might not be married and you might not be married, but is this the right time to get into a relationship with this person? And so, one of the factors I want to talk about one of the factors outside of timing is anger. There's a lot of folks out there that haven't dealt with their personal anger. They're angry at the world. They're angry about what happened as a child. They could be angry about what happened in a previous relationship. They could be angry about where their life is. They could be angry with mom and dad. There's a lot of things that go into play here. And if you've ever met somebody or know somebody or personally have been in the situation where anger is a big thing in your life, you understand that anger kind of comes out in the worst scenarios. And when we're angry internally, we lash out about a lot of things. Okay? When we're angry internally, we lash out about a lot of things to people who are relatively quite innocent. And we do that because we're not really thinking straight. We're so angry about things that we have pushed down, that we have pinned up this anger and resentment, that it'll come out in some odd situations. Recently, I was at a meeting with somebody, and a good friend of mine, and he brought his girlfriend, and she was very sweet, but you could tell, very high-strung, which is not a bad thing. Was very passionate about what she was talking about. She was talking about working with the charity and that kind of thing. Very interesting, very passionate, and I respect that. I respect the passion, and so I respect the passion, but I could see there was a little bit of something going on between them, and he moved her water out of the way to move it over by her, and she kind of jumped on him. And there were small little things here and there that I thought were very interesting. And I guess, fast forward a couple of days later, he gives me a call and said, "Hey, could you talk to me for a few minutes?" And I did. And he asked me, what I was thinking about, the interaction. And he told me that when they got in the car, she started screaming at him. And that was wild. I mean, and I did not expect that, but he said that he's been used to that she'll just go off and she'll get angry and upset and frustrated, and he doesn't know where it's coming from. He doesn't understand why she gets so angry. He doesn't know why she goes off the handle. And so, I said, I can talk to you for a little while. I don't want to get in the middle of this stuff, but, I can help illuminate maybe some stuff. And so, I asked him, I said, do you know if she has any issues with her parents? And there's some issues with her dad. And I said, is there some abandonment issues? And surely there is. And then there's some abuse possibly in the past. And I said, okay. I said, that's where the anger stems from. Okay. And I said, and the thing is that when we don't deal with our baggage and we don't deal with our anger and our resentment, what happens? Well, what happens is that anger and resentment comes out in every single thing we do. And every single thing we do, it comes out. And it's toxic. And it ruins all the good stuff in our life. It ruins all the good stuff in our life. Even if you're having the best of days, when you are angry at the core, it's like you can't stop being angry. It's like you can be happy, but you find faults and anger in everything. You lash out, you jump to conclusions, you're very quick to get angry. And I understand because I've been there before. I understand because when I was younger, my dad ended up, divorcing my mom. And I think subconsciously I knew it was going to happen, but consciously I just did not. I didn't see it coming. It was almost like a big accident. It was like watching a train wreck. And I remember my dad moved into an apartment, and it wasn't very much longer after that he was seeing somebody. And, it wasn't about him seeing someone else, but it was, kind of, recognizing the fact that he had been seeing this person for quite some time. It just didn't show up. And I started getting very angry and resentful of the fact that, my dad had not been quite honest with my mom. And I'm not throwing shade at my dad at all. We are very close now, and people make mistakes. It has nothing to do with that. We're actually very close. But there was 5 years that we didn't speak. And there were 5 years that we didn't speak because he ended up getting married to this woman. And, talk about, just the bride of Frankenstein. My God, she was just so mean. And I saw that side of her, and he just didn't see it. And so we kind of went back and forth on some arguments, and it was kind of a tough time. And so, one day we had an argument, my dad and I did, and he basically told me to F off, and that was it. And so we didn't speak for a very long time. And, he didn't realize that she was a liar, and she was just up to a lot of stuff that he did not understand or see because he was, brainwashed, by the relationship itself. So, the lies, I'm sure the sex and all that stuff in between. So anyway, after I guess he figured out a lot of stuff, everything came to light years later, and that's when he called me, and we ended up working out our differences. And it took us about 4 or 5 months to work out our differences. It's not overnight. But that anger that I was harboring for a long time in that process when I wasn't speaking to my father, I had to work through all that. Because I knew in my heart of hearts that I was angry at him, and I knew I was angry at his actions. And I knew that it wasn't him at the core. It was what he did, and everybody makes mistakes. However, being that he is my father, it makes it harder because you have these labels. You put a lot of power with these people, your parents. And so I had to literally figure out why was I so angry and back it up and really think about those types of things and letting go. I did a lot of journaling. I did a lot of meditation because I saw in my relationship, I was dating somebody at the time, that I would go off the handle a lot. I would argue, I would fight, I would yell. Sometimes I would just yell for no reason. I would just find a problem with my boyfriend and just go off. Maybe I just got so angry I would leave. Wouldn't come back till the next day. Stuff like that, that's crazy. But yet, it wasn't him that I was angry at. I was angry at my dad. I was angry at the situation. And so think about a lot of times when we're dating people, we don't realize that they're harboring a lot of anger. And that anger has nothing to do with us, but yet we happen to be the closest to it, right? Okay? That's the way life is. And when we're the closest to it, what happens? We get it. Okay? It's like when, you're married and your spouse is having a difficult time at work. Who are they going to take it out on? You. And think about if it's not something that just happened. Think about if this has been something that they've been holding under the surface for a long time, haven't dealt with it. And especially the older you get and the longer the resentment has lasted, the worse it is. Okay? The worse it is. Because the longer you have that resentment, the longer it has time to fester, the worse it is because you haven't dealt with it. And when we try to hide things, they get bigger and bigger and bigger. And what happens is they unconsciously get into everything we're doing. And so when I have clients that come into my office and tell me about their girlfriend or their boyfriend who has anger issues, who goes off the handle at anything, my biggest concern is that person needs to seek therapy. They need to go into counseling. They need to go into a life coach or a therapist or a licensed counselor to help them get past this anger, but really, first off, to identify where it's coming from. And I'm telling you honestly, if you try to tell your significant other to go get therapy, unless they're highly evolved, they're going to just take it out on you. Okay? How dare you tell me I got to go get therapy? You need to go get therapy. You think you're all that? And then anything that you've done in the past year that's questionable will be brought up and will be, thrown into your face no matter what it is. And think about that. It's like that's what happens, because they find the issues, they find the faults. And a good example is, I recently had a client come in and we were talking about her boyfriend's anger. And she said, I think that he should come in here and visit with you. And I said, well, I can do that. I said, I usually don't like couples therapy, though, until we work separately, because I like to try to figure out what's going on with that other person. And sometimes not all that needs to necessarily be shared. And I said, but I wish you the best of luck by bringing up the fact that you want them to see therapy, because it doesn't always work. Well, sure enough, she told him what she wanted to do, and he found fault. He's like, what do you want me to go to a therapist for? I mean, you're the one with the problem, okay? You're the one that had too much to drink the other night and made a fool out of themselves, and you have an alcohol problem. You have an addiction problem. And so it becomes very difficult, because if somebody's not willing to accept the issues that they have and accept the fact that they could use some help, it's going to be contentious. It's going to be a problem. They're not ever going to say, yes, I need to get some help. And that directly goes back to timing, because when somebody's ready to be in a successful, happy, quality relationship, they take responsibility for their actions. They take responsibility for their past. They take responsibility for their happiness, and they do what they can to be better people, to be better than they were yesterday, to put their best foot forward. And it takes personal work. I've done a ton of personal work in my life. I've done a ton of it. And it doesn't stop. But I do it because I care about myself, and I care about my future. I care about my present moment, and I care about the fact that we're born in this world on our own and we die on our own. And so that means that our relationship with ourselves has to be the best one. Okay? I mean, unless you go down in a ship with a bunch of people, or down in a plane with somebody, or whatever. But for the most part, we go on our own. And when that happens, we gotta be good with us. And I know that might sound a little morbid to some people, but think about it. It's not about, all these relationships. It's about finding the happiness and peace within you. And if you're in a relationship and you found that within yourself, and you're in a relationship with somebody that hasn't found that, that's not going to work. I mean, opposites do attract, but not like that. I mean, because when you're in a good, solid state of mind, and you're in a good emotional state, it is so amazing to be with somebody who, too, is also in an emotionally good state and in a mentally good state, because you can move forward. But when you're not, it's a constant holding back. You're not able to get to that next level because you're constantly arguing and fighting, and things are happening that you don't even understand why it's happening. And so right when you think things are getting good in the relationship, they come and do something explosive. Okay? Oftentimes when you're in a relationship with somebody that is not solid and hasn't dealt with their baggage, they start lots of fights, and they start fights when you've been having a wonderful day or a wonderful night, okay? Or things seem to be good. And they find fault in it, because remember, if you're not happy with yourself, you can't be happy in a relationship. When you start feeling happy in a relationship, you want to punish yourself because you're unhappy with yourself. So you're not allowed to have that happiness. So what happens when you become happy in the relationship, or you feel good? You fight it. And so you see that a lot of times in relationships, where people are having a wonderful time, and the next thing you know, one of them literally just goes off the handle. And it ruins the entire experience. And I've been in relationships like that, where everything's great and you're having a wonderful time and you're on a vacation and it's romantic and you just had a great dinner and you're loving life, and the next thing you know, you're walking back to the hotel room and the person you're dating is like, what the F? How dare you effing do that? And you just go, what is going on? Now, I agree with you. We're not really talking today about anybody that's dealing with bipolar or manic or borderline personality disorder. And those are significant things that contribute to situations like this. But I'm just talking about somebody that hasn't dealt with their anger. And you can see that presented in various other forms as well. But when somebody doesn't have anger management and hasn't dealt with their past, they're going to apply that to you because they cannot be happy. Okay? Because they don't have the self-worth of being happy as well, because they don't feel like they should feel that way. They feel like they should punish themselves because they have been punishing themselves for a long time and they haven't dealt with that anger. And I do agree, some of you might say, hey, Ashley, I dated someone with borderline personality disorder and there was a lot of anger involved, or I dated somebody that was bipolar, there was a lot of anger involved, a lot of sadness involved, and I understand that. And that is a part of that, but it's not just exclusive to that. The next thing that I want to talk about, besides timing and anger management and dealing with anger, is abandonment issues. Abandonment issues. When you're dealing with somebody, when you're in a relationship with somebody who has been abandoned in their life by a parent in a previous relationship, divorce, what have you, and they haven't dealt with that abandonment, you're going to have a problem. Okay? You're going to have a problem because they're going to take this out on you one way or another. And again, it goes back to timing, because timing is all about being in that right place, mentally, emotionally, physically. And if you are dealing with abandonment issues and have not dealt with it, haven't come to terms with it, haven't identified where it comes from, haven't released that anger and sadness and fear, and you're in another relationship, what's going to happen? You're going to think that person's going to abandon you. Oh, right when I open my heart to this person, they're going to walk out on me, so I better not open up my heart. Right when I put everything out there, all the cards on the table, they're going to screw me over like I was screwed over last time. And when you haven't dealt with that baggage and all the luggage and the Louis Vuitton trunks of abandonment, you're going to put that into the current relationship. And even though the other person may be highly evolved and want to take care of you and would never leave you, you're never going to see that. So flip the script. If you're in a relationship with someone that you feel may have been abandoned or haven't dealt with their abandonment issues, or mom or dad left them at an early age, or maybe they got a divorce and it literally just wiped them out. They didn't expect it. All these things that can happen. When abandonment's involved, the way that they live their life is totally different. And a lot of times, the closer you get to folks that haven't dealt with their abandonment issues, the farther they will push you, the more they will push you away, the more cold they become, the more distant. Because they want to leave you before you leave them. Okay? And that happens to a lot of folks, and a lot of people that have been abused, have been abandoned, all these things. That's normal. But yet, until you deal with that abandonment, you can't go into a relationship and be successful, because you're going to constantly think that they're going to abandon you. They're going to leave you. And then you're going to sabotage the relationship because you think that they're going to leave you. You think that they're going to leave you. So every time you have an argument, or you push the conversation to an argument, and you're going to leave me. I know you're going to leave me. You're going to leave me. And then eventually, guess what happens? You create and fulfill your own destiny, because they leave you because they can't handle it anymore. Because what happened is that you already knew they were going to abandon you. So even though they weren't, you created that. You did what you had to do by your actions, by your attitude, by the arguments. You did all this different stuff that led to what? Led to the abandonment, right? That's what it is. That's the key from A to B. And that's what I'm getting at, is that when you haven't dealt with abandonment issues, it becomes a problem. When you haven't dealt with abandonment issues in a relationship, you can't take that to the next level, because it won't be able to be taken to the next level, because you're still dealing with a different vibrational level, because you're still worried if this person's going to leave you. If you're worried about somebody leaving you, you can't get comfortable. If you're worried about somebody leaving you, you can't open your heart to them. If you're worried about somebody leaving you, you're always going to be on pins and needles wondering when are they going to take off. And because you're creating this thought process, eventually they are going to take off, whether or not we push them away or whether or not you push them away one way or another, that, it's going to happen. And when we're not in the right frame of mind and we're not really thinking clearly, that's what actually happens. And we have to overcome that by doing what? By doing the actual work. By focusing on why we're angry. By focusing on who abandoned us and how did that make us feel and how can we overcome that. You see what I'm saying? And those are the key things to being in a relationship, to finding a good person to be in a relationship with. And it's not a bad thing if somebody hasn't dealt with their abandonment issues or their anger. That's a normal human trait. It's not a good thing, because we have to deal with the stuff we don't want to deal with. We have to deal with the baggage we have, or we'll never get to overcome that baggage. You see what I'm saying? And I think it's interesting if you think about a good example of this baggage, and this just came to me in my head. Let's just say that you have 3 huge travel trunks, and you leave them inside your front door. So you open the front door and you put them right there. And so every time you go in and out of that door, you have to jump over all 3 trunks, right? Or you got to shimmy around them or do a maze through them or whatever. And think about it. That's constantly in your day-to-day life. It's obstructing your current life. And those are just, trunks of clothes. Now think about the elephant in the room. If you haven't dealt with the abandonment issue, your mom left you as a child and you were raised by aunt and uncle. Or maybe you were divorced and you didn't see it coming. You didn't see it coming. You thought everything was great and you were blindsided by it. Okay? You feel completely abandoned. You've been married for 15 years. These are things that if you don't deal with it, they're not going to go away. Okay? They're just going to ruin everything until you deal with it. And if you're in a relationship currently with somebody that hasn't dealt with these issues, you can lead them to water, right? You can try to help them find a therapist or convince them that they need to seek therapy, or maybe meditation or a meditational conference or a spiritual conference or something like that that can give them some direction. But if they're not willing to take that advice and actually roll with it, the timing's off. They're good people with issues. Everybody's got issues. You just got to work through them. Just because somebody has issues doesn't make them a good person. It means that they're a good person that hasn't dealt with their issues yet. But that means that the timing's not right for you. Both your timing is off, because that person has to be in that same realm of thought. They have to be willing to accept help and willing to go through that process. Because if they're not going to seek help and they don't want to take responsibility and they don't want to deal with their past, it's not going to ever change. You might take 2 steps forward just to take 2 steps back. And I think a lot of you might be in that situation right now. Maybe you've been dating somebody for a year, maybe 2, maybe 3. And you feel like sometimes you get really close, like things are working out and the relationship's getting really good and stuff's really happening. And then other times, because of an outburst and a fight that you weren't expecting, you take 2 or 3 major steps back. And, as you're pulling your hair out, you're like, is this ever going to get better? Well, no, it can't. Until somebody works on their issues and works in their past and takes care of that stuff and alleviates the pain from that, it's never going to change. It's a pattern. Okay? And you can't just miraculously one day wake up and go, no more pain, no more abandonment issues, no more anger. No, you got to work through it. Because otherwise it's going to come up every single second of every single day in this relationship. And so some of my advice to you on this podcast right now is that, first off, it's not about judgment. Judging people, I just don't agree with. But you don't have to live with them. You don't have to try to make it work. Okay? And I've seen some people struggle, and I've seen people go through the pain and suffering of trying to make a relationship work that literally was not going to work because it couldn't. Because 2 people didn't have both feet in, and both people had not worked on themselves. It takes 2 whole people to come into a relationship, not 2 halves make a whole. That's stupid. It's got to be 2 whole people that come into the relationship to make it a healthy and honest relationship that actually works and that you can actually grow together. In order to begin to grow, you have to have worked on the past problems. You have to see it in the right light, see it from a special, different perspective, and move on. And once you're able to do that, you can incorporate other people in your life, and relationships become healthier and more strong. And I know I dated and was engaged several times before I got married. And, I gave back the ring every time. And the reason for it is that I loved them, but it wasn't the right timing. I wasn't in the right place. I wasn't ready for a marriage. And I knew that because I hadn't really dealt with all my stuff. I mean, I was still dealing with the anger of my father walking out on that deal. Also, I have a health condition that nobody understood, and that was really scary to be undiagnosed and going through experimental surgeries and all that. So the fear and the anger attached with that, the anger of the father situation, okay, the anger of not being able to save my parents' marriage. A lot of stuff was going on. And, the anger when I found out, when I was 18 that I wouldn't be able to carry my own child. The anger, the sadness. It's a lot of stuff. And I don't want to go into all my sadness and anger, but I had to deal with a lot of stuff. Okay? And I remember being in relationships in the past where I took that anger out on people I dated. I took that anger out on people I was engaged to. I took that anger out. Why? Because it's got to come out somewhere. You can't keep that all bottled up. You'll blow up. And so I don't think that people mean to do it. I just think that it happens. Because there is anger, and it is there, and you've got to do something with it. And, it's just the way it is. And that person happens to be right there, and they say something, and it just hits you a certain way, and you just unleash a fury on them. And that fury has nothing to do with them. That fury has to do with the fact that you're so mad about what happened 20 years ago, and you don't even realize it. And it's not really mad. It's more like sadness and being upset and feeling bad and feeling used and feeling abandoned, because the mad is just the word we give it a lot, because it's kind of the masculine way of, that made me so mad, it pissed me off, instead of saying, hey, it really saddened me and kind of brought me to tears and, made me question my whole life. And it made me question everybody and look like, didn't know if I could trust them or not. And so the trust issues, the abandonment issues, overcoming that anger when somebody did screw you with your trust, when somebody did let you down, when somebody did abandon you. And so timing is everything. And timing to me means that you are in the right place at the right time, emotionally right and mentally right, to be in a relationship that you'll allow the other person to love you and you can love them unconditionally. And if you've had conditions all your life placed upon you by family, then you don't even understand what unconditional love is. So how can you love somebody unconditionally? You can't. And again, that goes back to, are you willing to work on yourself? Because when we work on ourselves, most of all our issues go away. Because our issues that we have, we bring to the surface. Okay? Our issues that we have, we put on other people. That's what we do, especially when we haven't taken responsibility for our issues. And I know sometimes we go, I just want to let that go. I don't want to think about that. But you got to think about it. A healthy person realizes in their life that they've got to deal with some of the stuff they don't want to deal with. They've got to deal with some of that stuff. And until they deal with it, until they come to terms with it, until they come to Jesus conversation, put it in the light and figure it out, it's not going to get any better. It's just not. It's like knowing you're sick, but you don't want to get diagnosed. You know you got something. You're feeling real bad. Okay? Barely stand up, but you don't want to go to the doctor to get diagnosed. Wouldn't it be better to at least know what you have and see if you can do something about it? Wouldn't it be nice to even try to do something about it, be proactive about it? At least the fact that you actually have an identification of what it is. And then you can go from there. And that begins by taking responsibility for our own life and knowing that we have to take what? It's taking responsibility for our own happiness. When we take responsibility for our own happiness, we get it. We understand that we have the ability to make ourselves happy. We have the ability to make ourselves sad. We can literally build ourselves up, or we can knock ourselves down. We have that innate ability within ourselves to do that. And when we take responsibility for our life, no matter who has hurt us, who has gone out of their way to screw us over, to abandon us, to make us feel bad, to break us, all that stuff, once we accept that that has happened, then we begin to mend those issues. And once we go through the process of healing, all of a sudden things get easier because you're no longer holding on to that stuff that holds you back. When we hold on to that stuff, it holds us back, it takes us down, doesn't allow us to be happy. We can't see the forest through the trees because we're too upset, we're too held back by this emotion, by this anger. And anger and fear and feeling abandoned never got anybody into a safe zone. Okay? And so if you're in a relationship right now and you're dealing with a lot of arguments and a lot of fights that you don't even understand how they started, and everything's great, and the next thing you know, your significant other is screaming and yelling at you, and, you can help them. And I admire you to try to help them find some help and to maybe speak with them and talk with them. But if you can step back and not get into that argument, if you can step back and not take it personally and realize that they're not fighting with you, they're fighting with themselves. If you can step back and realize that, you won't take it personally. You won't try to win. You won't try to defend yourself anymore. And also, when you begin to realize that timing is of the essence, you begin to realize that this relationship is not in the right timing. And so if you can step back and not take it personally and look at them as a genuine friend and try to help them as a friend, you will change their life forever. But it begins with not taking it personally. Because when they're arguing with you and they're fighting with you, they're fighting with themselves. Because remember, when that anger's within you, you've got to get it out. When somebody's fighting with you and it has nothing to do with you, it's them internally fighting that anger that they have not let go. And so knowing that it's not the right timing, and it takes time, and it sucks because you've got to distance a little bit of yourself, you've got to change the relationship dynamic, but you can help them. And maybe later on down the road, once they get help, maybe you try it again. Maybe it's perfect timing at that point. But a lot of times it won't come back around. But later on down the road, you'll know that you made the right choice because you'll meet somebody that's in that same space that you're in, holding that same amazing space that you can grow together. Find that amazing joy that you've already found. And then that person can actually find it too. And so there's no more crazy arguments. Sure, nothing's perfect. And sure, you might have arguments. But you understand where things are coming. And when there's an argument, it's about something that actually has to do with both of you. It's not a one-sided deal. So this is just a little bit on relationships. And I think this is a good question. Is this relationship going to last? And if there's timing issues and anger issues and abandonment issues, you've really got to step back and kind of see the writing on the wall. And that person really needs to get some guidance and help. And that's fine. And that's life. But it's probably not the right time for them to be in a romantic relationship trying to make that work because they need to make their life and their relationship and their situation work for them. If you haven't already checked out my website, go to ashleyburgess.com, ashleyberges.com. Also, check out my YouTube channel, Ashley Burgess. I got some videos up there. I put about at least one new video a week up there. And I got some really cool podcasts up there as well. I specialize in relationships. I specialize in helping people who are in relationships with somebody suffering with borderline personality disorder, amongst others. And so check out some of those videos and subscribe to the channel. And also let me know what you think. I really want to hear your perspective. And also, I want to hear your perspective on this podcast. Please leave some comments here on Spreaker or YouTube or iHeart where you're listening. And let me know what you're thinking. Because if you've been through this or you're currently going through this, I like to know kind of the issues and the timing that you're dealing with, as well as where the abandonment issues and the anger issues are coming from. And I do find it often from family and in the past and the upbringing in childhood. But, it also can come from a previous divorce and other things like that. And so if you have other ideas, please add those to the comments below this podcast because I want to hear from you. In the meantime, I hope that you're having a wonderful day or night, depending on what time it is for you and where you are in the world. And don't forget to continue to live your true life.